Minor scale. The minor scale is built off of 7 notes, as you know, using this formula. Each one of these notes is a scale degree, from 1 to 7. Each of these 7 scale degrees have a name. The names are as follows: tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, and subtonic. As you know, all triad chords need a root, a third, and a fifth. Well, these 7 notes are all 7 root notes in a minor scale, which means that there are only 7 triad chords in a minor scale. Those chords are the following. Now we'll go over each scale degree and the chord build on top of it. Tonic, minor scale degree 1. Tonic is the first degree of the scale. In the case of minor scales, the tonic note and the tonic chord also hold the feeling of home. So what I said in the previous section about it having a tonic function also applies here. The way the notes in a minor scale are separated make the tonic chord a minor chord. Its classical notation symbol is the Roman numeral for 1, in lowercase because it's a minor chord. While the tonic chord in major and minor scales both have tonic function, it's important to keep in mind the fact that the tonic chord in minor scales is a minor chord, while the one in major scales is major. That's because the third scale degree in minor scales is placed one semitone closer to tonic, making it a minor third interval. This gives the tonic chord a bit less stability, making it sound a little darker or sadder than the major one, so keep that in mind. And is present in almost all modern chord progressions that use the minor scale, being most often used as the very first chord in the progression. This applies whether you're making a melody that sounds sad, hard, pop, chill, and so on. Here are a few examples of it being used in popular songs. Supertonic, minor scale degree 2. Supertonic is the second degree of the scale. The supertonic note in minor scale holds the same characteristic as the one of major scales of being able to get resolved easily by going either one scale note up or down. So this is still a note that you will often see in top melodies and in instruments that only use one note at a time like flutes. But where it differs from the major scale is in the supertonic chord. The supertonic chord is made out of the supertonic note or scale degree 2, the subdominant or scale degree 4, and the submediant or scale degree 6. The way the notes in a minor scale are separated make the supertonic chord a diminished chord. Its classical notation symbol is the Roman numeral for 2. Again, this thing here means it's a diminished chord and not a major or minor. The supertonic chord has what's called a predominant aka subdominant harmonic function. These chords tend to progress to chords of dominant function, which in minor scales don't really exist anymore. In minor scales, the term harmonic function starts to lose meaning because of the difference in intervals in a major scale compared to a minor scale. This difference makes minor scales lose important note placements for things to really get a clear harmonic function. The changed notes here are scale degrees 3, 6, and 7. And as you know, the third scale degree is really important because it helps add a lot of stability to the scale. And with its new placement in the minor scale, it now possesses less stability, making the median chord and submedian chords lose a bit of that tonic prolongation function. And as you know, the 7th scale degree is the key note to make dominant function chords. And now with its new placement, the chords that relied on it are less dominant and more predominant. So predominant function becomes this catch-all term that encapsulates the chords that are not quite tonic and also aren't quite dominant, which I believe are almost all minor chords except for tonic sounding chords like tonic and maybe also submediant and mediant. Anyway, where were we? The supertonic chord is a diminished chord in minor scales. A chord being diminished made us almost not even refer to it as a real chord when we found it in a major scale. Here it's a bit different. The diminished chord has its place in the heart of most simple dark trap melodies, with artists like Travis Scott using it all the time in his tracks. Well, maybe not him, but his producers use it. That's because the diminished supertonic chord paired with the darker tonic sound of the tonic chord can make a really cool dark sound when used melodically and not harmonically. What I mean by that is that when the notes of these two chords are used in a melody, they can really get an amazing dark sound. Here are some examples of that. The reason tonic and supertonic chords in minor scales work so well is because their notes are placed really close to each other. These two minor second intervals create a very unsettling sound which when paired with the stability of tonic create a perfect sound for trap melodies. Besides being used next to the tonic chord, I have not really seen it in many tracks, reason being that the tritone diminished chords have create a sound not fit for most popular music. That's why I said melodically and not harmonically. Melodically meaning with the notes placed next to each other horizontally and not harmonically. And harmonically meaning with the notes placed on top of each other vertically, as in chords and not simply in a melody like the previous examples. Here's a simple example on how you can get started using the simple principle to make a simple hard trap melody. Mediant, minor scale degree 3. Mediant is the third degree of the scale. We discussed in the last section how the mediant has a prolongation function, but since then you learned that functions get a little blurry for minor scale chords, and this affects the median chord as well. The new placement of the 3 makes the median chord less stable and in turn less tonic, but the new placement of the 7th scale degree makes the median chord less unstable. So again, we're left with a chord whose function is determined more by context than by anything else. You might think this means that the median doesn't change from major scales to minor scales, but there are a few key changes. The first one is, like I said, classically the median chord in major scales is understood to have tonic function, so now that tonic function is a lot more blurry. The second is the way the notes in a minor scale are separated make the median chord a major chord. Its classical notation symbol is the Roman numeral for 3. And third, and most important in my opinion, the median chord no longer has that sad quality. It is still often used in sad progressions, especially in a 1-6-3 descending progression, but it's no longer a chord that is inherently sad. It becomes sad by context, not by nature. Either way, the median chord still works nicely when placed next to the tonic chord because of the notes in common, the subdominant chord because scale degree 3 resolves nicely to 4 and vice versa, and the submedian chord because of their notes in common. Once again, you can place chords however you want, there are no absolutes in music, but if I were to use a 3 chord, then 90% of the time I would use it next to either the 1 or the 6 chords, and for the purpose of helping me make a chill or sad progression. Here are a few examples of the 3 chord being used. Like I said, most times it finds its place next to the 1, 4, or 6. You'll find links to this video is on page 91 of your ebook. Subdominant, minor scale degree 4. Subdominant is the 4th degree of the scale. The subdominant carries the predominant feeling, meaning it acts as a nice bridge between tonic and dominant. But since the median note is now further away from it, the instability the subdominant chord introduces is now less present, making its function a little blurrier. Nevertheless, it's still said that in minor scales the subdominant chord has a subdominant function. The subdominant chord, much like the supertonic chord, has found its place in countless hip-hop beats in recent years because of the unique placement of its notes. So to explain that better, first we need to know where those are. The way the notes in a minor scale are separated make the subdominant chord a minor chord. Its classical notation symbol is the Roman numeral for 4. Now to refresh your memory and to set up what comes next, here's what a supertonic chord looks like. And now here's what those two look like together, but if the top note of the subdominant chord was an octave lower. Remember how I told you the supertonic was perfect for simple trap beats but only melodically and not harmonically? Well, this inversion of the subdominant chord does not have that ugly tritone in it, and is close enough to the supertonic chords notes that it's actually what is often used in hip-hop when you want to get that evil sound but harmonically. Meaning that when there's chords involved and not only melodic notes, the 1-4 progression is a go-to. Drake's producer OC famously uses it in almost all of his beats, and I believe that that is because of this very cool characteristic, and because of what comes next. But first, a few examples of the 1-4 being used harmonically. You'll find links to these videos on page 93 of your ebook. Now we can discuss the second reason. See, the subdominant chord is not only cool because of that, it is also an amazing chord to add when making guitar melodies. Going from 1 to 4 is done so often in guitar melodies, honestly I start every single one of my guitar melodies with those chords. And I believe they sound so great together because the 1-4 has not only this dark cool sound, but also because it allows you to simply copy the arpeggio you are playing in the 1 chord and transpose it up a few notes to the 4 chord, without making any changes, which helps to add that classic guitar arpeggio feeling. That's what I mean. The fact that the 1 and 4 chords are built using the same intervals allows you to simply copy your arpeggio and transpose it up, which helps give your guitar melodies an interesting sound. But this special characteristic doesn't only work for going up. If you transpose your arpeggio 5 notes down or a 4th interval down, this also works. Of course, now you know that by going 1/4 interval down, it is actually a 1/5 progression, but with the notes inverted, and going a 4th interval up is a true 1/4 progression. But still, this and the fact that these two chords have a cool dark sound to them makes them perfect for guitar melodies, especially if you place your notes in a realistic manner, which I guess I might just show you how to do right now. The key to getting a realistic sounding MIDI guitar chord is doubling the root note 1 octave up and moving the 3rd also 1 octave up. Why? Well, because if you grab a real guitar and play a chord, the notes will be naturally placed in these octaves. Why? Because whoever invented guitars decided so, I don't know. Just try it, it works. Besides all that, the 4 chord of course also leads nicely to the 5 chord, and I've also seen it used often next to the 6 chord. Anyway, moving on. Dominant, minor scale degree 5. Dominant is the 5th degree of the scale. Now the dominant chord in a major scale has a dominating function, and so does the one for minor scales. But this time the scale degree 7 is no longer a leading tone, but a subtonic, which makes the dominant chord less dominant. Some would even say that the dominant chord in natural minor scales has a predominant function, but honestly when I hear a 1-5-1 progression I still hear the 5 as quite dominant. Anyways, the way notes in a minor scale are separated make the dominant chord a minor chord. Its classical notation symbol is the Roman numeral for 5. Despite having now less of a dominant effect, the 5-1 progression is still quite common in songs that use the minor scale. In my experience, there's almost never a 5 chord in a progression unless there is also a 1 chord in there somewhere. Besides the 1 chord, I've also seen the 5 paired up with a 6 chord. That's because the 1-5-6 creates a nice soulful sounding progression and the 6-5-1 creates a cool dark sounding one. But honestly, I've seen the 5 chord paired with just about any chord in the scale and sounding good. That's because most chords in the minor scale sound kinda predominant, and the 5 chord, while not so dominant, definitely sounds more dominant than the 3 or 4 for example. So they move nicely to the 5 chord almost always. Here are some examples of it being used. And here are some video deconstructions of melodies that use the chord. The links are on page 96. And as a little help, here are the other chords of the scale, and how often the 5 chord was placed either before or after them in the 8 melody examples I just gave you. Submedian, minor scale degree 6. Submedian is the 6th degree of the scale. The submedian chord, just like the one in major scales, has a tonic or tonic prolongation function, meaning it can be used as a replacement of the 1 chord, and also it can follow the 1 chord in progressions without there being too noticeable of a change, if the inversions are done correctly. Again, don't worry about inversions, we'll go over them later. And that is because the tonic and submedian share the 1 and 3 scale degrees. The way notes in a minor scale are separated make the submedian chord a major chord. Its classical notation symbol is the Roman numeral for 6. Also, remember how in major scales we had this 1 chord, the mediant or 3, that when used in a chord progression made the whole thing feel a lot more emotional and sad? Well, I believe the 6th chord is the equivalent of that chord in minor scales. The 6th chord is often used in a descending progression after the 1 to create an emotional feeling. So much so that after analyzing most of Juice WRLD's sad songs, I found that all of them use the same technique of falling from 1 to 6 to create sadness. Of course, that's not the only use for a 6th chord, as shown in the previous page about the dominant chord. The fact that this chord has kind of a tonic sound to it, and the fact that it's made by scale degrees 6, 1, and 3 also makes it a good progression starter, as well as a nice follow-up to chords 3, 5, and even 7. Here are some examples of the 6th chord being used in sad progressions, and some examples of it being used to start progressions. Links on page 98. The last common use for the 6th chord I'd like to discuss is its use in dark melodies. Producers for Gunna and Lil Baby use this chord's shared notes with the 1 chord, scale degrees 1 and 3, in repetition to create an eerie, dark feeling in a melody. This approach takes advantage of the dark sound the minor 1 chord has and pairs it with the emotional feeling of the 6th chord. Add to this the repetition factor and you get melodies like these. If you want to make a song like you'll need these 2 chords, or chords built on top of notes 1 and 6 of your minor scale and move this note down. The 1/6 is used by Gunna and Lil Baby all the time to get that repetitive dark sound. And all this song did from here is add a simple up and down melody using mainly the same notes from our chords. Invert the notes like this, and add these notes for rhythm. The reason this melody sounds like this is because they're using a 1/6 progression. That means notes on the first and 6th notes of your minor scale and skip notes. Now I usually say the 1/6 sounds sad, but when it's put in repetition like this it can sound dark. And all they did from here is arpeggiate, add these notes, and add these flute notes. Links on page 99. This sad dark effect that appears when mixing chords 1 and 6 is also very commonly used in modern reggaeton melodies, like these. Subtonic, minor scale degree 7. Subtonic is the 7th degree of the scale. The reason the 7 is no longer called leading tone like in major scales is because the leading tone and subtonic are actually in different places. Leading tone is 1 semitone above, which makes it hold a lot more tension, which is partly why the major scale harmonic functions are so well established while the minor scale ones are blurrier. The 7th scale degree is the tone that is the most unstable, and with it moved 1 semitone down, some of that instability is lost, which in turn makes chords like the 7, 5, and 3 sound different than the ones in major scales. This is a problem that was solved by creating the harmonic minor scale, but more on that later. Back to the natural minor. The subtonic chord is made from scale degrees 7, 2, and 4. Like the dominant chord, the subtonic chord has a dominant function, meaning it creates tension and wants to resolve to tonic, but obviously because of the non-existent leading tone, this function becomes a lot less effective. The way the notes in a minor scale are separated make the subtonic chord a major chord. Its classical notation symbol is the Roman numeral for 7. Since the 7 in minor scales is no longer a diminished chord, it's used a lot more often in pop songs and such, because it no longer has that unsettling feeling of the tritone that diminished chords have. So much so that it's even part of my favorite sad chord progression, which is the 1-7-6. In my experience with this chord, I've seen it paired the most with chords 5 because of the notes they share, and 6 and 1 because it creates nice voice leading. Also, the term voice leading will be explained later. While the 7 chord here is not as dominant as the one in major scales, keep in mind that it still creates some tension when used in a track, so it can be a great help to add movement when needed, just like the 5 chord. And with that, now you know all 7 chords. I know this was probably a lot to take in your first watch, so here's a nice little summary of the most important stuff. After this, we're moving on to the harmonic minor scale. This summary will also be available on page 102 of your ebook. And if you think you got the information so far, you can move on to this chapter's challenge.